Currently I have a pretty elaborate catch can setup on this thing, which includes this huge 1.5 liter vibrant catch can and then a bunch of AN lines running around. I'm going to go ahead and talk about the routing later and why I decided to go this way and why it is actually the best version. But first I wanted to show you guys something cool. This is a Gen 1 valve cover. Not sure if this works on Gen 2s exactly, but Gen 1s it does. I'm pretty sure the internal baffling is actually the same. The only difference is the Gen 2s will have this baffle here over the chain, which mine actually is modified to have as well, which makes this just as good as the Gen 2 valve covers. But I was looking at this and I thought, wow, it looks like a pretty decent size. I wonder if an AN fitting would fit in there. Did some measurements. Turns out you can actually tap the stock valve cover with AN threads and put an AN fitting in here. Currently, I just have an AN line hose clamped over the stock fitting that runs to the catch can, but today I'm going to show you guys how to tap this, actually use a nice 90-degree swivel fitting in here, and then show you guys how to properly make an AN line, because I see a bunch of people doing them wrong. This fitting actually is pressed into the valve cover, so you can actually take it out. The way I'm going to do it is just put this 10 mil Allen in there to kind of bend it and break it loose, and then I will just work it back and forth until I can get it fully slidden out of the cover. There you go, just like that. This is our old fitting. Now we're actually going to tap out this hole to accept AN threading. This is actually the thread size for a -10 AN fitting. It's going to be 7/8 by 14, and I picked this up on Amazon. You don't really need to get a super good one. Better quality helps because it'll cut through easier, but it also is aluminum, so it cuts through easily. I've already verified that this works on a spare engine, and I was actually super surprised. We're going to go ahead and thread this in there, and then we're just going to work it in slowly to get it all the way through. But first, I am going to put grease on this. That way the chunks of metal don't fall in. There is good baffling in here. Like I've said, I've gone over the baffling before. I was pretty surprised how decent it is. You can't really modify it to make it any better. But just to be safe, we're going to put grease on this. That way this will catch all these shavings instead of it falling into the cover. Even though it wouldn't be sucked into the engine, but still better safe than sorry. Alright, quick lesson on making end lines. This one already has one end on it, but I'm going to add this swivel 90-degree sort of thing so I can actually run it off the valve cover easily and not get in the way of the turbo. But a lot of people get this stuff wrong when it comes to building AN lines, so today I'm going to go ahead and talk about that. First off, you want to make sure your line is a straight, clean end. So an easy way to do that is to wrap it up in tape and just cut off excess. That way this ends out being super tight, because we're going to have to squeeze this end of our fitting over the line, and it gets really difficult if this is frayed out at all. So I'm actually going to go ahead and cut this down with a grinder, and then end up throwing this onto here and then taking this whole thing over to the vise to do the last step. Alright, so not ideal to be working with this on the ground, but now you can see we have a clean cut. Now what we're going to do is get our tape line. We're just going to peel off all this tape, and it should leave us with a super clean cut with no frays, and if there are any, extremely minimal. There you go, very clean. That's exactly what you want. Now you want to go ahead and take your fitting and press it over. You want to try and twist it as you thread it on, just makes it easier to get it over the hose. And you want to bottom it out inside the fitting. There you can see there's going to be a section inside. I don't know how this is going to focus on there, but the hose is bottomed out inside the fitting. You can kind of see right there. That's exactly what you want. Now we're going to go ahead and take this whole thing over to the vise, and we're going to put this end in the vise and start threading this into here. Alright, so now with the vise, we're going to go ahead and lock in our line. They do make special jaws to do this, that way you don't mess up the fitting, but I don't really care that much, so I'm just going to go ahead and throw it in here as is and call it a day. You don't want to squeeze them too tight because it'll actually bend the fitting, and it'll make it really difficult to get this end in there. Now, before you put this end in, you actually want to oil up these threads because they are aluminum on aluminum, and this is going to be going to the rubber hose Before you do all this though, you also want to blow up this line and make sure you're good to go. If you know that this line is empty, now you can go ahead and throw a bit of oil on this. This is literally just 530. We're just going to toss it on there. That way it'll slide in this hose easily. Go ahead and drop it down into their hose, sort of push it in a little bit, and then begin threading it in. Once the threads are started, you're going to want to make sure you hold the hose up. That way this fitting doesn't push the hose out of the other end. And you'll just go ahead and thread it now as much as you can by hand before grabbing a wrench and actually doing the final tightening sequence of this. Now this end of the fitting is where a lot of people mess this up. You'll see this isn't fully bottomed out. This is actually how you want it to be. You want to try and match up these flat faces with the end of the fitting. Most people I see will over tighten it and just tighten this till it bottoms out. It's not how these are designed. They are, like I said, designed to work just like this. But now this end of the line is terminated and this whole line is ready to be slapped back into the car with the new valve cover modification with that freshly threaded for the AN fitting. Here we have a stock Mazdaspeed valve cover, and there's something I want to show you about this baffling. Like I said, I'm pretty sure Gen 2 covering is the same, but I'm not exactly sure because I can't really find any info on them. But I'll go ahead and crack this off here. I already undid all these screws. There you can see is our factory baffling. You have two sections here. Go ahead and ignore the shavings there. It's from trying to tap this first one. You have the two sections there that split it off. And they're actually sealed off with this plate here. So everything stays sort of down here. This is only designed to help out with vapor not coming out, not actual oil. So this is exactly what you would want to see. As you see also, these ports go down here and then flow out through these holes here. This is for vapor or air to flow out. That way oil can't really get into this area very easily. You're not going to be catching much oil through this cover, but this does help vent the crankcase for sure. Now that I sort of gave you guys a visual of the inside of this valve cover, you know it is well vented and well baffled, so this isn't really something to worry about. I've seen people add ports like down here and stuff like that, and even one off the cap. They do make caps that add an extra port. But like I said, it's pretty useless to keep adding vents off the valve cover when the main issue is the pressure in the actual crankcase at the bottom of the engine. You don't want to just put a band-aid over it by allowing it to vent out of there. Your oil still won't be draining properly, and there is better ways to do it. Your breather will probably work on the top of the valve cover, but the reason you don't want to focus on the breathers off the valve cover is because it'll be fighting the gravity of oil pulling it down if the only place for it to breathe is outwards and up. These Ford engines are pretty amazing because they have this down here. Well, it's missing right now, but a PCV plate. There's a huge plate there. You could add additional parts on, which is where most of your pressure will be, is inside the actual crankcase here. Allowing the ports to vent off the crankcase will prevent the fighting of oil coming down from the head into the bottom of the block, which will help out with draining and overall ventilation. When it came to my personal catch can setup, I decided to take things on the route where I determined it was best, and that is with a sealed catch can and large fittings. Let me go ahead and show you. The main sort of part of this whole system is this Vibrant catch can. It's a 1.5 liter 4-port sealed catch can. It is huge. It has a dipstick. It came with -12 ORB ports. I just have -12 to 10 AN adapters on there for the fittings, and then I have 10 AN lines running, one off the valve cover, 2 coming off the crankcase using a Damon PCV plate, and then 1 running back into the intake. And that is the proper way to set it up. I think the best. A lot of people will run these vented catch cans, which does work if your car is actually pushing out tons of pressure through the crankcase. But really, when you think about it, this is the best way to have it, because by having another port that restricts to the intake, if you have a good catch can, it'll catch all the oil anyways. There won't be anything really going back into the system. And this will actually hold vacuum on the crankcase, which is exactly what you want. On the old engine I had that was really bad in terms of blow-by, this would get full. Like, this filled up halfway, this catch can. Conveniently, it has a dipstick. I drove this car for like 30 minutes. Granted, I was ripping on it for that 30 minutes, but look at this shit. Drop the dipstick in. Put this down here, because I know it's going to be a lot. Oh my god. That's like 2 straight inches of oil in this can already. That's ridiculous. As you see now, it has a dipstick still. There's barely anything on there, and I've had this since I put the new engine in with this setup, so this engine's much more healthy. But if your car is using a ton of oil, having it sealed will pull vacuum on the crankcase. I actually measured it with a cap and a port on it with a boost gauge. For some reason, the boost gauge would read 4 psi at static pressure, but it actually pulled a vacuum. It pulled 1 pound of vacuum and dropped down to 3 pounds of boost on the gauge, which is actually -1 psi, meaning vacuum. It would pull vacuum on the entire crankcase in boost, which is crazy. I can only imagine how much vacuum is being pulled on this crankcase now, especially knowing this engine is much healthier, doesn't have as much crankcase pressure at all, and I've never had issues with it. Like I said, it's extremely healthy running this catch can setup. I also have a Damon catch can running in the stock PCV port. These cars are pretty interesting. They have a PCV port coming off the engine block to the intake manifold, but this is obviously going to be under pressure. So while you're in boost, that catch can or that system isn't doing anything. That's purely idle and decel. So if you actually want to fix blow-by, which is when you're in boost and there's so much pressure building up in the crankcase because the compression leaks past the rings or just the pistons moving up and down cause excess pressure in the crankcase, you need to have it vented out while in boost, and that's why having it on a separate system unrelated to the intake manifold is smart, because this will never be under pressure. It'll only be under constant vacuum, so that's why running it through the intake manifold before the turbo helps out a lot. Like I stated, since I do actually have the Damon catch can down there, I doubt we'll be able to see it. I'm pretty confident there's pretty much no oil running into this intake manifold, which is great because these are direct injected engines, and right now I don't have any form of port injection, so keeping the intake valves as clean as possible is top priority. Couple rules of thumb you want to follow if you are creating your own catch can setup, that is to use the biggest fittings you can. You don't want any restriction in the system. The whole point of it is to get pressure out, and the way to do that is with having the biggest ports possible flowing in the most easy flowing path. That way your catch can setup can effectively vent out all the crankcase pressure. Crankcase pressure is completely normal. It's worse on boosted cars because obviously there's more pressure going into the cylinder. It's worse on higher mileage engines. It could be worse on a built engine if you have low ring tolerances to allow you to run more boost. There's obviously going to be blow-by. It's not a problem with the car, but you do need to work on getting it out. As I already explained, not good to have them venting only from the valve cover. That just causes oil to build up in the head, not really drain down effectively. Having them on the crankcase is amazing. This is the absolute best way to have it because all the pressure built up there can exit straight out of there, and your valve cover can do its job by venting out excess if it needs to and still drain oil down from the head, causing everything to be lubricated and just work properly. On a stock engine, Mazdaspeed, not really much of an issue. As you see, it's not really full at all. There's like nothing in it. There's probably a layer this thick in the absolute bottom of the catch can, but having it like this will make it reliable to where I can go on track and rip it all day and not really have a problem with oil building up or losing too much oil or anything like that. It's just the proper way to have it if you're going to be beating on the car, and that's exactly why I did it the way I did. Super happy with it. Looks great, easy to work with, and just have no complaints with this catch can setup.